Okay, we have a quorum. We have there's Andra, there's Caitlin, there's Brian, there's Ray, and there am I. So we can call the meeting officially to order, and it is 4 o'clock on the dot. Hey, Caitlin. And so we'll start. I know that Tanya has told me that she has you can only stay with us for half an hour. Is that right, Tanya?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and Rick's there, and I think Gary Schaff is going to be trying to join as well for a later item. So if you could be on the lookout for him, Mary.
Okay.
First time on the end is calling to order. We've just done that. The consent agenda, which is the minutes from the July 14th meeting. Do we have any comments on the corrections on the minutes, questions?
I have one.
Yes, please.
Yes, I noticed on the minutes that it mentioned 2 pending members waiting appointment to the commission, and I just wanted to make note, as well as there are 2 student members awaiting appointment too. So I wasn't sure if that part of the note was in reference to folks who have previously been on the commission and are looking to come back on, or more broadly.
Yeah, that was for the previous, for Rick, Rick and Gary. So I will put that in there about the students.
Thank you.
Right, maybe we should, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Andra.
There was another, maybe it was a typo in the number 4 under business. It said, let's see, Barth stated no funds. It was about the pool, but it allows time to still develop improvement to the ideas. And then there's a word methodic with a period. And I think maybe it's just a typo. You were revising and forgot to take that part out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let me go back to the point that Caitlin raised about members waiting for council approval. It's actually a mayor's appointment. We should clarify, you know, the first step is really what I understand is we have actually 4 people who have submitted applications to join the Climate Policy Commission. 2 of them were to be for reappointment at the end of their term, which is April 30th. And then there are 2 others, 2 students, as Caitlin said, who have applied to be part of the Climate Policy Commission, and so they're just they didn't attend the meeting last time, but there are 2 applicants, one from high school and one from SOU. So if we want to record that, I suppose we can, but it should certainly be for mayor's appointment, and then subsequent council approval, I guess.
Okay.
Rather than just I don't want to write the mayor out of that decision-making process. Okay. Any other, Brian?
Is action going to happen before the new structure for this commission?
We can talk about that in a second. I imagine that's going to be something that Tanya will talk about in council update, but I think probably not. My guess is that it's not going to happen before, but we'll have to see. It could. When I spoke with the mayor a few months ago about it, she was at that time, and this is now out of date, was intending to proceed with appointments until the commissions were reworked. But I think it looks like we're on a faster track for, well, I don't know if it's faster or slower, but it looks like the council will consider the revised commission before it will have an opportunity to approve, before the mayor appoints and the council approves new members for this commission. So I don't know, Brian. I guess this is the answer. I think it's not going to happen. Yeah. But I think it's good. What I appreciate though from Mary is that she's keeping track of it. That, you know, I don't want these 4 people who have expressed interest in being on this commission to be forgotten. So we should make sure that whatever the process is for creating the new commission, that these 4 people get reminded that they, you know, that they're considered for, or that they have to resubmit, then they do so. Any other comments on the last month's agenda? Can I get a motion to approve? I need one of the standing members. Okay, Ray. So are you motioning? You're muted.
Making a motion to approve the minutes of July 14th.
Thank you.
Second.
Any,
With
thanks, Brian.
amendments, with the changes
With amendment.
discussed.
Thanks. All in favor, can you raise your hand? Okay, we've got unanimous. Thank you. And Mary, you've got the changes, right? I can work with you on that if you want.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is staff update, and Mary has invited Jason Wegner here. So Mary, would you like to introduce Jason? Tell him why you've invited him?
Yeah, first
Tell us
of all, we have a new division called Innovation Technology, which consists of IT, GIS, and AFN, a bunch of acronyms. And there's a new director position for that. And Jason Wagner was selected to be the director of this new division. And I invited him to come so you guys would get a face to, you do a lot of communication sometimes with them and with IT. So I wanted to introduce him and bring him on board so he could just say hello. And Jason, I don't see you. Are you, there you are.
I'm here.
There
I'm
he
here.
is. There he
Yep.
is.
Thank you. Yeah, as Mary said, I'm the new Innovation and Technology Director for the city. However, I've been with the city for just shy of 15 years as the GIS manager. I may have emailed many of you at one point or another about geographic data, something like that. Now I'm in this new role overseeing GIS, which did I already say stands for Geographic Information Systems, basically digital mapping, the Ashland Fiber Network, and our Information Technology Department, which serves the needs, the internal needs of the city as far as servers, storage, all that stuff, user help desk kind of stuff. So as far as what we're doing that relates to your work, we're trying to gather the information that you need for city facilities. And we actually found a report from 2015, 2016, where this was addressed, or at least studied, but it was on a shelf in a PDF document, so to speak. And so what we've been doing is entering that data into our asset management software, so we can then run reports on it and give you all sorts of summaries and things like that. So we're turning that around and giving that to Scott Fleury, our Public Works Director, so he can then turn around and share that information and such. So really excited about finding that information and plugging it into our asset management.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. When I spoke with Scott about that a month or so ago, 2 months ago, maybe, he was talking about maybe a dashboard, setting it up as a dashboard similar to the water dashboard. Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah. The sky's the limit. So I am now thinking about that. So yeah, the beauty with GIS and all the technology that we have available to us, if we can think it, then we can probably come up with a way to make it happen. So yeah, we'll do that.
We've got there's a whole host of things of characteristics of those buildings that we would like to, make sure we're tracking. And I guess you're working with Scott to do that. So
yeah,
we'd love to participate with you on that. So thank you. Ray, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, is this the same report that got sent to us about the energy audit, sort of that was done and recommendations on city buildings several years ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's the very same. Yeah, but what we're doing is
it's kind of when LEDs were first coming in, they were still looking at fluorescence and things like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and recommendations that they had, but they actually went through and did an inventory of things that we had. So we're pulling that information out and putting
Okay,
it
great.
into a database, essentially.
That's great. So
Yeah.
one of our, we were talking about this, I think in a previous session, about a facilities plan that really allows the city to plan for retiring of gas equipment, fossil fuel equipment. So really identifying the age of those pieces of equipment and when it makes most sense to be ready to replace those with higher efficiency of electric efficient equipment. That's kind of a practical use of this information. Of course, there's lots of other uses as well.
Absolutely.
Public use. Great. Well, thanks, Jason. It's great to put a face with the name. It's really
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming to introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. And you're welcome to stay for as long as you want. I do want to see if Mary has anything else she wants to talk about staff.
I have other things to attend to, so I'm gonna jump out of here, but thank you. And my email address is just my first name dot last name at ashland.or.us.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye. Thanks,
Okay.
Jason.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Jason.
much.
Okay, so I do have some more. I talked with, there's been some emails that have been going around trying to inquire about the grant program.
Loan.
Oh,
USDA loan.
Yeah, loan program, sorry. I just lost my pen. And so finally, Tom McBartlett called the USDA loan department and asked them about the program and asked him if we were still in the running because we had not given him the forecast yet or other financial information that they wanted. And they said yes. That he explained to them that we are very short-staffed and we need to hire a finance director who will then do the forecasting. And most likely the person that is going to replace Stu will do the oversee of the program, you know, be like the third party, and we will collect anyway, they'll work out the details on that. But the most important part was that we were still in the running. As long as they do not cancel the program, we still can get in on that. So I then talked to him about when they thought they would hire someone. And he said they're recruiting with headhunters for the HR director position and finance director position. And hopefully that's moving along now a little bit, and that shouldn't be too long. The other thing that I talked to the attorney about was the procurement policy that was stated in the March meeting, council meeting, that it was given staff direction to create a work plan, and then the city attorney would create a procurement policy. And he wasn't aware of that. So we had some emails go back and forth today, and he was he's going to keep it on his radar. And I told him that most likely the new Stu would be creating that work policy, that work plan, and then he would work with the attorney on this policy. But the good news is that because it was on the look ahead as a mistake, that, you know, it came up. And so we were able to directly talk to the attorney about that and make it on his radar now. And he didn't know that it was assigned to their office. So both those things has a little bit of progress in them, and they're not closed. They're going to go forward, but it's just going to be a matter of time. It's really about when they get Stu's replacement. That has not been advertised yet, as we have 33 openings in the city right now. And so they are working as fast as they can to get the HR director here so they can help. And then I sent you guys Tom's PowerPoint that he sent to the Rotary, that he presented to the Rotary Club, just as for informational. Just wanted you to see that. And I checked with our meter relay technician, and he thinks that we have processed about 100 solar meters within the last 12 months. So that would be the bi-directional meters that they receive credits for the solar that they intake, and it goes against their bill. They get credited once a month, which is actually quite a few for 12 months, because usually in the past, we've only done 1 or 2 a month. So it's really the information. I mean, people out there are really starting to get involved in solar. And that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Mary. And I want to just tell everybody that Mary has been amazing in following up on every lead, any hint of a lead or any question. She pings me and she says, okay, I'm going to call him and find out. So thank you so much, Mary, for your doggedness and your really
You're
chasing
welcome.
down everything. Let me just say a word about, just in case it wasn't absolutely clear for everybody, what Mary was referring to with the city attorney. There was an item on the look ahead that talked about banning new gas construction and remodel, major remodelings. And so there's been some questions about, and it's supposed to be a presentation from the CPAC chair, which CPAC hasn't yet been created. That was for next week's meeting. So there's been several different inquiries about that. It seems to all accountants that is a reference to the policy for city facilities that was in Rick's presentation to the city council study session on March 14th. And there was there were two action items. One was for the city attorney to come back with a policy, and the other one was for Scott Flurry and basically the facilities plan. So what Mary has chased down and finally connected the dots to our city attorney to put that on his work program, because I think it wasn't yet on the work program formally. So thank you so much, Mary,
Yeah.
for that.
And
that
also, I
explains to
don't think I
everybody.
mentioned, he is going to do some preliminary work around this. So he's going to start even without somebody. So that's good news.
That's great. And we're happy to support him in any way that would be helpful to him.
Okay.
Okay, Ray.
Mary, in the discussion with Tom, was there anything about a date when we need to get back to the USDA?
No,
Right.
no, they said we could take a pause until we got our people in place, until we figured out what we were gonna do. And the only thing he said, and he's gonna put it in writing, is that as long as the program does not get pulled by the federal government, we can still get the loans. So apparently they have plenty of money. That's not the problem.
So just for the rest of the committee, I can give a little bit of context. This is the RESP program, and I can't remember what RESP stands for, Renewable Energy something or other. I don't know, Rural Energy something or other program. It's got to do with making loans available for energy efficiency and everything else. That's an account in the USDA rural development part of USDA. USDA has to do with agriculture and rural development. They make loans and grants to rural areas, and Ashland is a rural area. So we are eligible for those kinds of things. And those are, as Mary says, open resources. My concern on that is that, the federal government fiscal year ends at the end of September. So while the program is open, continuously, there's no deadlines for submissions for submitting. Grant officers who process those kinds of things have their own natural rhythm and tend to bunch things together towards the second half of the fiscal year. So most likely at this point, we've missed the opportunity for this fiscal year, and it'll just be into the next fiscal year. But that was kind of evident in any case, because it would have had to have been responded to their questions much earlier. Rural Energy Savings Program. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. So yes, thanks. We want to keep it alive, but I guess the other piece of that is there's also additional resources now. If the Inflation Reduction Act gets approved by the House and signed by the president, then there'll also be resources, tax credit resources for individuals, tax credits for individuals who want to do some of these same retrofits. So it could be a mix of tax credits and on-bill financing for that, if the city is able to secure one of these zero interest loans. Anything else, or any other questions for Mary on staff update? I want to make sure that we have time for Tanya for the council update. Tanya?
Great. Well, that's great news, Mary, on the USDA program. I spoke to Joe, I guess about maybe 2 weeks ago about it. And last I heard was that we had missed a deadline and would have to start over. So I'm so glad that Tom did that follow-up. Couple things. There was a great presentation. Bob and the folks from the Realty Association came in front of council at the last meeting with the Home Energy Score program. I think that was a really good conversation. I expect that staff it seems like is going to be bringing that back in front of us for sort of more of an official stamp. Potentially, I asked about it at the end. It was still a little unclear, but I think there's no problem with this committee going forward, this commission moving forward and continuing to develop it. So great job, Bob and company, everyone who's been working on that. The council also, we voted on the League of Oregon Cities legislative priorities. So City of Ashland is a member of the League of Oregon Cities. Every year they have a series of committees that are put together to come up with legislative priorities, and then all of the cities in the network then vote on the priorities that are developed in those elements. And three of us myself, Councillor Hyatt, and Councillor Duquesne all served on different committees. So we all kind of tried to get Ashland's needs in the mix. I was on the Environment and Energy Committee. But in any event, when we did all of our voting, we did back one of the climate elements, which was adequate funding for state climate initiatives. So we've got these new laws that are coming into place, and we want to make sure that cities have the money to be able to follow those mandates. So that was a nice bit of news. I think it was good to see that support across the council. In terms of the climate policy analyst position, you may have heard that we had a failed HR director search. That's why we're back at it again. And so in the meantime, Sabrina Cotta, our deputy city manager, is serving in that interim role as the HR person. As Mary mentioned, we have a significant number of vacancies across the organizational chart. But I did talk with Joe last week at our check-in and asked him, is there any possible way to get this announced? It's a pretty straightforward position. The funding's there. I think it wouldn't take, it'd probably be pretty obvious who to bring on from that spot. So he jotted it down and he said he would check in with Sabrina. So hopefully there's some way to get that announcement out and get movement on that position. And then again, Bob, just following up behind what you were talking about with the look ahead. One of the things that we did when Rick came in front of the council that last time is we said we wanted to hear from the public works director and kind of see that process. I think by October, we said 6 months, but we had also asked for an interim check-in. So I think that might be what's also potentially coming up. We wanted to find out before the 6 months if there were any hitches in their ability to put that plan together. So I'm also checking in on that to see if we're going to get any sort of an update before October, given that we're already most of the way through August. It may just be that we look at it at that 6-month mark instead of once before. And then I think the biggest question in terms of this commission in front of the council right now is the council revision, the sort of systemic revision that's underway right now at the city council and with the city manager. I know that Bob, you and I believe all of the commission members have received the drafts. I think you got another draft last Friday. I haven't seen a draft after that, but I sent to Joe, and I think they probably crossed in the mail because I sent that on Thursday, and then Friday morning he sent out the revised piece and told me that he saw my edits and he was going to look at them and look to get whichever one's included. I haven't seen a later version of it, but I wanted to let you all know what I've been doing with it. I think that this council needs more guidance on climate than they do on general environmental issues. And in combining these two commissions, there's a potential for that climate signal to get lost. And so I've been sending draft language over to Joe that puts the Climate Energy Action Plan implementation at the very top of what this commission would do, with the ability of the council to ask for guidance if there is something that sort of comes up in the environmental realm that they might need help from the commission on, recognizing that most people who are serving here are serving from a climate-centric focus. You'll also see, if you look at the way that that's laid out, that there are a lot of ex officio members, many more on this commission than on any of the other commissions. And he did that specifically so that he could accommodate a much larger group of people working in this space. But what I would say is right now it's supposed to be on our agenda for next Tuesday. We haven't seen the agendas yet. I haven't seen what he's done with the edits. It might get pushed off for one more meeting. But if this commission has something to say about it, I know we've received a lot of information from individual commissioners, but if the commission itself has something to say, I think that would be welcomed by the council ahead of the conversation, whether it's this Tuesday or the following Tuesday. I think it would be good for our city manager and the full council to hear if there's a sort of a consensus opinion. But my opinion is that this is really about climate and far more than anything else. And the way that it was originally written, it was kind of a mosh of climate, environment, and really not much direction from the council to this commission in terms of what it would do. But this commission is one of the ones that would stay. It would just be that there would be a combining of the current Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission and the Climate Policy Commission. So that's what is trying to be worked out. I also sent quite a few other edits to just try to streamline the commissions across each one. They're all written a little bit differently, trying to make those much more consistent and coherent across all commissions. But then again, leaving this one able to have more ex officio members. I requested earlier on that we go ahead and have the mayor appoint people to this commission and to others, because we have situations where their chair isn't on the commission at this point because they've timed out and their request to be put back on hasn't been processed because of this other sort of more systemic look. So Mary Akins was, she was supportive of that. And then when Joe had asked that we just hold off on all appointments until the dust settles a bit and we know which ones we have left. And so that's my understanding, is that no one is going to be appointed until it's clear which of these are standing commissions and which ones are management committees or standing committees and management committees. The management committees don't come to council, so anybody being added to those will be added at the staff level. So that's what we're waiting to have shake out in the meantime. But I just wanted to let you all know what the conversations I've been having around the scope and focus of this particular commission have been.
Thanks, Tanya. I see Rick has a question in the chat where he's asking if there's provisions for continuity through both reappointments and staggered terms. The resolution doesn't talk about that. That's more of a process issue, I think.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to take that up, especially in this case where we're going to have fewer seats than we have existing commissioners between the two commissions that are standing right now. So part of it's going to be finding out who wants to carry forward under the new scope, and figuring out where they would fit in that process. One of the corrections I did suggest was, they just talk in the document about straight 3-year terms. People will come on for straight 3-year terms, and I put in there some language around staggering to keep it 1/3 kind of each year, turning over. I don't know what will be done with that edit, but that's one of the things that I was looking to do to maintain that continuity.
Ray?
Tanya, I noticed Joe put committees instead of commissions in the new document. Does that mean anything, or is?
It's interesting. I actually have.
To me, it meant something. I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
what's your take on it?
I think people have a sense that a committee is more advisory than a commission, but actually I've looked up the definitions and there isn't really that. What I've seen is a committee is generally a subset of a larger group, which these are not. These are not subcommittees of the committees of the council. And the commissions, the requirement of a commission is it has a specific charge. Well, that charge in my mind can be advisory. So that's one of the things that I brought up to Joe in my comments back, is that I don't personally see a reason to change them from commissions to committees. And so we'll be, I expect this to be a long conversation when council is able to take it up, because there are a number of things that I think council may decide to do differently than, or at least have that conversation around potentially doing differently.
Right.
Bob, I don't know if we want to just kind of have a general talk about this subject while Tanya's still here. I was out of state and didn't have an opportunity to send my comments to the manager about it. But one comment I do have that maybe Tanya could get an edit for this new commission is there was absolutely nothing that I saw about transportation, which I think is a huge part of what we do and need to do. And I know there was they talk about that as being an kind of an as needed committee, but I just think that the issue of transportation needs to be placed into this new committee, whether it be, sidewalks and bike lanes or parking or traffic plans, it all really is going to affect our carbon footprint.
Yeah, the approach that I've taken is that the primary charge of this commission or committee would be to help the city implement the climate and energy action plan. And there are specifically transportation related elements in the seat that this commission could still work on in the absence of having a standing transportation commission. I'm a little hesitant to bring out any particular issue out, to highlight any particular issue in the narrative above others that are in the seat. But I see your point, and there's always been an area of overlap between what the Transportation Commission does and what this commission does. And it's my understanding that they would be going to become one of these management advisory committees. So they'll be still operational on some level. But I think, you make a good point, Brian, in that we want to make sure that this commission has the full breadth of what's in the climate and energy action plan in terms of what things it should work on.
I just wouldn't want this commission. I mean, transportation is such a big part of the SEEP, and it's not explicitly outlined as part of the duties of the new joint commission.
Right. I'm actually.
And I don't want certain counselors saying, well, why are you guys working on that? That's not part of your charge.
Right. No, and I realize that the latest version that you've all seen from Joe doesn't have the edits that I sent over when they seem to be crossing in the mail. But my recommendation is to get rid of most of it and to have it say this commission's charge is to help the city implement the SEEP and to answer specific environmental requests of the council.
Yeah,
If the council thinks that we could use some help on something, this commission would be the most obvious one if it's a general environmental issue, but that really the SEEP is the center point of this work. So we will see where that goes in terms of what shows up in the next packet. But if that edit, what would be useful to me is I've got to jump now, but any conversation that you all have today, if you come to a consensus, if you decide to make some sort of statement, I would love to hear what you think about that, because I think the most important thing right now is to get the charge right. And so, that's where I've been going with it, because in my mind, it really is about climate and it's about the SEEP. But if you all agree with that, or if you disagree with it, that would be helpful for me to know before the conversation comes about.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Tanya. And I'm realizing that it would have been a good idea to put this on the agenda explicitly for discussion in this meeting. And maybe we can add it. I think we should add a discussion of the resolution in this meeting, so that we can actually come to some elements of input to the city council if the commissioners, the voting commissioners, so decide. So thank you, because now that last time we didn't have a commission in between, now we do have a commission meeting in between the next meeting, but it slipped my mind. I will say, just before you leave, Tanya, that I had a conversation recently with Marnie Koopman, who until April 30th was the chair of the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission. She told me, we, as I said in the last meeting, she and I had met with Joe and Sabrina about it before seeing his resolution. So we had another meeting about it just to talk about the resolution. She says that there hasn't been a meeting of the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission because they don't have a quorum. So they don't have an ability as a commission to make any comments. So I think if we decide in this meeting to do that, I think it could actually be very helpful. In addition to the individual comments that the individual members have submitted. So thanks for that background, Tanya. And I think I guess it's an opportunity now to see if we want to make any changes to the agenda. So we'll take that up. So, Tanya, I think we'll see if I guess it's an opportunity now to see if we want to make any changes to the agenda. So we'll have to take that up. So we'll take that up. So we'll have to 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 take
All right, that sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
And I'm planning to reach out to Marnie as well before the next
Okay.
bit of time. I know we've gotten some comments from those commissioners.
Members.
As well, but.
Right.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank
Okay,
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So let me, yes, Mary.
I just have a question. I thought I remembered reading that the students and the representative from SOU, the high school students and the SOU and the Recology representative would be ex facto members.
Ex
They would be
officio.
allowed to vote in case they needed a quorum, but that adds additional room to the commission, right?
Yes, it
So
would
there'd
add
be-
additional.
They would
those
be
are the-
included as part of the core. They would be ex facto or something.
Ex officio. So in addition to the
Ex officio,
9, I
yeah.
think there were 6. I think there were 6 ex officio members.
Okay,
Um,
that helps.
Yes, and they wouldn't vote. They wouldn't count towards quorum unless I think the idea was that they would. Well, they could count for quorum if we needed to.
Right.
If we're
Okay.
missing. So in terms of process, I think we can add items to the agenda for discussion if members of this commission so move and second and we approve. So is this an item that we would like to carve out some space for in this specific meeting?
Well, I had
So
some
somebody would-
concerns, but
Yeah.
I think
ahead, Ray.
Tanya addressed most of my concerns. Sounds like she already gave that input to Joe, so.
Okay. Okay, so you don't see a need for any further conversation or trying to draft a commission?
Well,
comes.
someone else may have some concerns. I don't have
Okay.
any immediate ones after this discussion we just had.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else?
I mean,
Hey,
there are the obvious concerns of having more people on the committee, but less than the 2. But I think focusing on the seat would be better than what Joe had originally outlined. Sorry, Caitlin.
So I guess the issue for us to discuss is whether we as a commission would like to discuss that and draft something as input for the city council meeting this coming Tuesday that would underline that point, or whether we do not want to do that, or even can talk about doing that and leave it to the discussion that happens in the city council meeting without input from this commission.
I think this
um,
commission should give feedback to council personally.
So in order for that to happen, you would have to move, I think, for us to have a conversation about to add to the agenda discussion of this resolution and potential comments that this commission would give to the city council before the city council meeting on Tuesday.
Okay, I so move that we amend the agenda to add a discussion on this resolution to discuss whether or not we'd like to provide comments. to
Okay,
the
is there
I'll second.
anyone else? Andrew, second, is there any discussion of that as an amendment to adding that item to our agenda? Is anybody that does not want to add that to the agenda? Can we have a show of hands about adding this to the agenda? Okay, we'll put it in the agenda. We'll put it up pretty soon, I think, but I'll have to look at the agenda and see where we're going to go. I do want to make sure we'll rejigger the agenda a little bit. Okay, Brian, are you going to talk about other announcements from commissioners? Your
No,
normal
no,
topic?
sorry. I was just raising my hand to support the
Yeah,
motion.
Thanks. Okay, are there other announcements from commissioners? Brian, you normally are tracking the state, any state action. I don't know if you have anything to report this time.
I don't have any report this month.
That's great. Thanks, and I appreciate you calling in because I know you're out of town this week as well. Ray?
Yeah, I just want to say I met with Marnie and we started the discussion on what was in the minutes from last week about getting together and putting together a short summary of, I think the question really is why should the city and community of Ashland spend resources on climate action? And it's really focused towards new city staffers and council members who may not have been around when the SEEP was implemented. And so we're discussing sort of a 4 to 6 page kind of document that can be used as a reference that would give some of the history of the SEEP and how it passed and what it means and what some of the short and longer term impacts are from climate action on this community. And then what has the current commission done relative to that SEEP? Because in discussion with her, and it kind of came up with Tanya as well, I think, is that Joe really doesn't know much about the SEEP or the history of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably in part of the piles of
Yeah.
background.
He's
information
had a
on his
lot to
desk.
go through, but anyway, sort of a short reference that can be used for education purposes.
Excellent.
And if-
That's great.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray. Other announcements from commissioners? Caitlin?
Oh, I was just giving my thumbs up to that. I was just thinking with all the open
Great.
positions that be hired, seems very important document to have.
Super useful. I agree. Thank you. Okay, let's continue on down the agenda. Representatives of other commissions. We don't have any representatives of other commissions. Public forum. We don't have it. I haven't. Mary, have you seen any submissions from public forum?
I have not.
We don't have any further attendees currently attending. Okay, where are we now? Business, formal planning. Ray, do you want to take us through the master tracker?
Yeah. First thing I'd say, if you're looking for the look ahead, typically I had gone to council business where it's posted there, and I noticed this week it was 2 weeks behind the one that the city council used. So that doesn't always get updated. So you kind of check the date at the bottom. As far as the look ahead goes, again, we're still looking at 9/6 for 3 presentations by Public Works on some of the TAP master plan, the storm and drain, and the sanitary sewer or wastewater. So that's still on there. And then I think I had questions about that 8/16 presentation and Tanya answered that. So that's good to hear. The other thing is I sent Scott a note about the TSP because one of the last meeting we were wondering what's happening with that and when could it get going. He did say that we got funding approval from ODOT, which is what we needed to help us with our plan, and that they're working right now on updating sort of the rules to the latest transportation rules that got passed. And then, so Scott thinks it'll probably be the end of the year, if we're lucky, to start that process here within Ashland in making that update. And that's all I had.
And thanks, Ray. Any comments or questions from others? Okay. Nope. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Clean Buildings Home Energy Score update. So as Tanya mentioned, we did a presentation to the City Council last week, and it was about 15 minutes. And there are links into the agenda today to the staff report that Stu prepared on that, and also the presentation that was the PowerPoint presentation that was prepared by the Association of Realtors, and also some slides from Stu. I think, as Tanya said, there was tacit support from the council. There was not a vote. There was not any staff action that was recommended. The conclusion at the end of the meeting was a little ambiguous to me. That seemed to suggest that staff would come back with something, and I don't know what it is that staff would necessarily come back with, but that may or may not happen. I think it was enough to really get the council's thumbs up to continue working. It doesn't really require any specific city policy, council policy support, just the realtors appreciated having the attention of the city council and the opportunity to present the program to them. And I think we're going ahead for full speed. Should say that I had a Zoom this week with staff from Corvallis and Bend. Both cities are considering a home energy score mandate for sales. Corvallis has actually had a first reading of that in their city council a month or maybe 2 months ago now, and is going to have a second reading of that in September. And they're considering it passed the first reading, but in a split vote. So they're considering for the second reading whether to continue and push for a mandate requiring home energy scores at the time of sale, time of listing, or a voluntary program. And so the staff reached out to Stu and then also to me at Stu's recommendation to talk about what our experience was. One of the things that I think they're really weighing is that, unlike our case, they don't, we talked about a mandate versus a voluntary program that people call a non-mandated program a voluntary program. And so the voluntary program is really a status quo. It's really nothing. There's no such thing as a voluntary program. It's that people can today, even without any announcement from the city or any action from the city, decide they want to get a home energy score if they can find a home energy score assessor. And one of the challenges that cities face is that people don't get licensed. Inspectors don't get licensed to do the home energy score assessors unless there's some sort of support from a city saying, yes, this is what we want. Is there either as a mandate where we're promoting this here in Ashland and Jackson County? We've taken a promoted approach where the realtors are promoting it to their buyers or sellers, and the city is promoting it also through its website and through its own channels, and that it leads us to have some hope that there'll be a market of assessors that will become licensed and then be able to conduct these home energy scores. In Bend and Corvallis, they weren't sure. They don't have, the realtors haven't stepped up in those two places to say, yes, we want to collaborate with you for a promoted program. So there's really a much weaker infrastructure for making this a program that could actually take off. So that's what they're weighing, I think, in their particular case. I also want to say that I met with Dan Cunningham earlier this week to talk about, because Dan, as you all know, Dan Cunningham does home energy audits, and I invited him to this meeting, and I guess he couldn't make it today, to discuss the city's role in doing home energy assessments. Dan has reiterated that he intends to, and he's talked with Tom to get licensed as a home energy score assessor. It's not a heavy lift actually, because he's got all the background, and it's just a matter of going through the paperwork to do that. And then that would give him, so then he would use the home energy score methodology to do his assessments when he does it, and then upload those results into the Green Building Registry, which I see as a big advantage to try to get as much data as we can at home in the Green Building Registry. And now having talked with Jason Wagner, it's also, maybe there's some interface there with the city. More importantly, I suppose the conversation I was having with Dan is something I mentioned last week or last month, that we need to think through how Dan would prioritize his work program, because currently he's providing home energy scores free of charge to any Ashland resident who comes forward and says they want one. If the demand is likely to go up quite substantially, which would mean that Dan couldn't satisfy that demand, particularly since including because the Inflation Reduction Act includes $125 tax credit for home energy scores that are conducted. So it could actually essentially be free of charge to a homeowner. So there could be a lot of demand. So making sure that Dan directs his work program towards the need that cannot be met by the private market and not undermine a private market of assessors. So we're continuing to talk about that. We talked about the possibility of the city charging a fee for certain maybe non-low income residents to get an assessment. That's a more complicated process to happen. There's a fee structure, a fee schedule that the city council approves. That happens usually in May of each year. We've missed that for this year. So an amendment to that fee schedule probably wouldn't happen until next May. And then there's also just the challenge of managing, those kinds of the accounting for those flows of money. So more likely what Dan was inclined towards would be directing his efforts towards low income homeowners and renters that would, and then really promoting the ability, the city's offer to do home energy assessments for renters and low income homeowners, and really promoting it much more than the city's promoted in the past. Because Dan is working alone, it's been hard for the city to promote it broadly because he can't really respond to all the demand. So if we do start to have a local market of assessors, then he could direct his attention to those groups, I think, more reasonably. So the big question is, how do we get more assessors? And we have 2 people that are currently going through the process to become licensed to conduct home energy score assessments in our area. And I'm going to be meeting with the realtors who are coordinating this effort in I think 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll be promoting with additional people who want to get licensed to do this. But I think that's going to be that's our real challenge right now, is making sure that we get assessors. We absolutely don't want to do anything that's going to undermine the potential market for assessors. I kind of tried to go through that pretty quickly. I hope I didn't lose people along the way with some of those concepts. I'm kind of steeped in this, so maybe I took some for granted. Are there questions about or comments about some of the points? I know that Caitlin also, as an action item, she provided some text, and I want to go through that in a second. But any comments on what I said so far? Mary?
I have a question. So are the real estate assessors going to be charging a fee to do the assessment? And then you said possibly that we would get a kickback from doing the assessment? No? And that where we could maybe charge nothing, and wouldn't that create a problem? Or is that not true?
That's not what I intended to say.
Oh,
And the realtors are the real estate agents are not doing the assessment. It would be third-party assessors. That could be, for example, a home inspector that during the course of a transaction of buying a house, often buyers hire a home inspector to do an inspection of the house to see what kind of needs to be done. One idea is that those people could become licensed home energy score assessors as well, and add that to their business. So the Real Estate Association has reached out to, I think, around 40 of the local home inspectors to see if they would be interested in providing, in becoming licensed to do home energy score assessments.
okay.
And then there's resources available from the Realtor Association and the city to pay a portion of the costs of getting that license.
Okay.
And the other thing about kickbacks, I never use the word kickback, and I would ever use such a word.
That was me.
But what I was trying to say is there are 2 options for the city of Ashland's doing home energy scores on its own, assessments on its own, which currently it's being offered for free. One possibility would be to charge for a portion of those that are done by the city, not by third-party inspectors.
Right.
The other possibility would be to direct the free service to specific groups within the city.
Okay.
I can help with the minutes on that. It's a little confusing. Brian? You are muted. You're muted.
Sorry,
Brian,
if
you're
somebody,
muted.
I should know this, but if somebody wants a home energy score right now in Ashland, Dan does them, and we're waiting for 2 other people to get trained. Do you set that up by contacting the city or contacting Dan or contacting a realtor?
So currently, that's a good question. So currently what happens is if you want a home energy score, the actual methodology called home energy score, which is the one that's promoted by the state of Oregon, you would have to get somebody down from far north in the state to do that. There is nobody locally licensed to do a home energy score in Ashland. What Dan does, Dan provides, can do a home energy audit, and he has his own methodology. It's not a methodology, but Dan will become licensed, is interested in becoming licensed to use the home energy score methodology, which will allow uploading to the Green Building Registry. In addition, there is one person who in the past was licensed to do home energy scores, and he has decided that he will become relicensed to do it, so that he'll be available to Ashlanders. And there's one other person who responded to the realtors outreach and said that he would like a home inspector who would like to become licensed, and he's going through the process right now. And there may be others, but I don't know of others at this point.
You cannot get a local one right now.
At this point, there's no such thing as a locally provided home energy score assessment. There are other kinds of energy audits, but not the home energy score assessment. So I'm trying to be very clear about that. There's a difference, and there's fine differences, fine points of difference. A home energy score is a fairly simple methodology. Some of the other audits are much more involved, which involve a blower, sealing the house and doing a blower and trying to figure out exactly where the leaks are. The home energy score does not require that. There are other scores that do that. And there's another score that applies principally to new construction, and that is available locally already. Right? Ray, you're muted. Ray, you're muted.
I'm getting there. I just wanted to note though, but Dan's evaluation will allow you to get rebates from the city of Ashland. And you need to
yes,
have that
exactly.
to get
And
a rebate.
That's right. And that's what we're looking at. And I was talking with Dan about that as well, is that a home energy score should allow, an identification of the kinds of upgrades that could be done, need to be done. And then that would be acceptable by the city. And then Dan would probably have to do the inspection ex post to allow the rebate, but that's right. And that's because a lot of this discussion on the home energy score has been around sales. Dan typically doesn't do it for people looking to sell the house. He does it for people that already own it and are planning to stay. But yes, good point, Ray. I wanted to turn to, I got language from Caitlin about the home energy score report. Remember last month we were talking about adding specific lines to the home energy score report about how improvements may improve indoor air quality. So what I'd like to do is share my screen, and let's see if I can. Do you have my co-host? I am, yes. And share my screen and share the. Can you see that? The yellow. So Caitlin's suggesting natural gas appliances emit pollutants, including methane, nitrogen dioxide, and formaldehyde into your home. These pollutants are harmful to human health. By replacing gas-powered appliances with electric appliances, you protect your family's health in addition to creating energy savings. So do we have any comments about that? What I would need to do, the process that I would follow once this commission decides on language is I would share it with Stu and also with the folks at the Department of Energy, Roger Kainu, and also Anthony Roy at Earth Advantage, and see if this is acceptable to them as well. I think it should be, but they may have some specific ways that they have to look at it as well. Is there any comments about the language as Caitlin drafted it? I can't see everybody on the screen, so you're gonna have to shout, I think, if you want me to recognize you.
Bob, I think this,
Ray?
yeah. I think this parallels the comment I had made earlier in the recommendation section it doesn't really prioritize electrical over gas. And in the example that was given, in fact, it just to get a more efficient natural gas, and this is how much greenhouse gas savings you'll have. It doesn't mention if you went electrical, you might even save more. So the fuel switching part of it,
Yeah.
To
So,
me,
yeah, thanks.
might need some improvement, so that if you put this comment in and you had fuel switching in there, then you've got two things people could look at rather than just have this one comment in there. That, oh, and besides higher greenhouse gas savings going electrical, you also have a health benefit.
I
Yeah,
was,
Ray, go ahead.
oh,
Is it Caitlin?
yeah, I was just going to say, Ray, to your point, I wasn't sure how the process works. Like if a home has, say, a natural gas stove, and then there's going to be a recommendation that goes into the report, like, is there a human, putting that in, or is it automatically saying if this, then that, so that, I don't really understand the mechanism of how, who or how the recommendations get put in. So perhaps that was an outstanding question. I was hoping, we could find out from last time of how, to make that change as you suggest, like how that could be implemented.
So let me comment on that, because I did reach back out to Roger Kainu on that question, Ray, after you raised it in the last meeting. And he said, yes, indeed, that is something that has been discussed. And at the current time, the Hone Energy Score doesn't prioritize electrification over gas. That's something that's an ongoing conversation, and probably something that will be could be modified in the future. But at this point, it only talks about efficiency of the equipment, and doesn't give you extra points for in terms of efficiency for switching from gas to electricity. Of course, it does talk about your total carbon footprint, which is a separate item in the, but it doesn't. That's a separate number, separate assessment, not as part of the score itself. But it is possible that maybe we should add, I think I'm taking from your idea, Ray, is that we should also say natural gas appliances, maybe something that includes adding a reference to the higher greenhouse gas footprint of natural gas appliances. So therefore the benefits could be in terms of health and reduced emissions.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
or it
suggesting?
could say, if you want to maximize energy savings and greenhouse gas emissions, these are your options. And you could say, well, electrical gives you this, natural gas gives you this, but also be aware natural gas has health issues also, besides energy savings and efficiency.
Yeah. Can I suggest, Caitlin, do you have a reaction to? I know this goes beyond what we asked for you to do in the last meeting, but I wonder if you have a reaction to what Ray is saying and about the drafting. Would you be willing to participate in a drafting committee?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I mean, and it'd be helpful to understand where this is going in the home energy score. If it's part of that bulleted list, do we make, how do we design this?
Yeah.
So sure, happy, I support that point that Ray wants to put in. I think it's a good one. And so, whether that's all worked into one or two separate items, TBD. So
Yeah, and again, we don't know if this is a state standard and you can't really mess with the output, or how much freedom we have to control their recommendations.
Well, we can't mess with the calculation of the score,
right?
But we can certainly put text in, some specific text in that talks, about the direction that we want to provide. So what I'd like to suggest is that you, Ray, Caitlin, and I add, look at this as a starting point, and then try to add some text that also talks about gas and greenhouse gas emissions, and the dual benefits of switching from gas to electricity. Let's see, and then let's just draft something, and then we'll see whether we can
Okay.
put that fits within what's permissible in the non-fixed portion of the report. Does that make sense to everybody? I'd like to get a show of support or on that. Everybody okay with that? Yeah, okay, let's do that. So that's we'll come back with this. That's an excellent point. Let me see if I can stop sharing so I can see everybody. There we go. Okay, great. Thanks very much for that. I want to move on to the next topic. Let's see. Path off natural gas. And so this is Andra, your topic. Thank you very much for doing the legwork on this. Just to preface this by saying that the city of Eugene, since our last meeting, has taken some steps to direct the staff to come back with policies to prohibit gas hookups in new residential construction and then subsequently commercial construction in the future. So Andra did a deep dive into it and has a really nice PowerPoint presentation to share with us. So I guess I
Do
can
you want to share it?
share
Or
it.
can I share mine? It says.
Are you a co-host?
I have a thing where I can share my screen, so.
Do it. Well, I don't know if
I
that's
will
not gonna work unless you have
let's
to be a
see.
I
co-host.
just made her a co-host. She should be
Oh, you
fine.
did?
Do it.
Okay,
You can do it. You can share it then. Go ahead.
okay. All right. So this was, I watched the videos on the 2 work sessions. They started off by having a discussion about their current situation and their own carbon assessment for their city. And that was done by something called the Good Company. And they provided the greenhouse gas inventory for Eugene. They determined existing building supply, best practices, etc. And then the staff reviewed basically 5 fossil fuel ban approaches that were taken by other cities. So before they made a decision, they looked at these 5 options. And so I'll just go over those quickly with you all. Limit gas production, prohibit to buildings where electric options are already available. So that was something that's easily done. So it's kind of like no need for infeasibility, low rise residential. It's kind of what they called low hanging fruit. Second one was apply the gas prohibition to new buildings and provide exceptions for buildings containing certain uses. So that would be factories, industrial, laboratories, hospitals, jails, things like that. So those would have to be, you'd have a blanket ban and then exceptions for certain building uses. Then they had end uses, something where they would put a ban on end uses within a building. So that has to do with not, prohibiting gas stoves, for example. But this is something that they said may not be under local control. This was something that came up because Oregon has a statewide building code. So anything that the statewide building code, you can't go against whatever the statewide building code is. And this is something that could need an amendment, what they call the code amendment, in order for that to work. And then apply it to only end uses within a building where there are known electrical options. So there would be no prohibition because the electrical options are already there. Again, it's not completely in their local control. There might be some bump up with the state code. And then there's the one where they apply a prohibition to all new buildings with the ability to request a waiver. And this would be all newly constructed buildings where electric build is, and then a waiver for where electric build is infeasible and not feasible. And they had they had 2 definitions, one for infeasibility and one for the good of the public or the common good, something a lot like that. This one was available for local control. So they discussed the different aspects to building electrification. They went around and around, 2 long meetings. But there was definitely a sense that they wanted to turn off the spigot of natural gas, stop the leaking, that there was a need for systems change and how people spend money on energy. So part 1, the natural gas ban on new construction in residential, low-rise, 3-story buildings or less. And then part 2, natural gas ban on industrial and commercial construction. So there was some arguments back and forth. A lot of it, there was quite a few counselors on there, quite a few commissioners on there, our council members who were very for it's time to do something. We've got to do something. Let's start with this. One of the main arguments is when I kind of hear in our voices a little bit about that the new construction, this ban is going to have a very small impact on our carbon footprint, on reducing our carbon footprint, that there's other aspects of the community, particularly transportation, has have a much greater impact on our carbon footprint. So there were a lot of people say we should be putting our energies in that instead of this. But in the end, the motion that passed was to direct the city manager to draft an ordinance prohibiting natural gas and other fossil fuel infrastructure in all low-rise residential buildings, which are permitted after June 30th. Now, part of them doing this is they have to have a public hearing on this. So they've scheduled a public hearing for the fall, and they've also scheduled work groups on how they're going to proceed with the commercial side, because the part 2 of this was they did want to have a ban on commercial as well, but that has a lot more sort of complications with it, a lot more. The low-rise residential seemed most easily implemented, so they felt they could move on that. So they separated the 2, and they're going to pursue the commercial and industrial. And I'm thinking that they're probably going to be using, considering some of these waiver type aspects that they might have to consider for certain industrial uses, like laboratories, hospitals, emergency use, for example, using gas generators when there's, for a hospital, when there's an electrical outage, etc. So I'm not going to go over these following slides unless you want me to, because they did go over the code amendment process. So if you wanted to make amendments to the state code, there's a process for that. They did go over what a waiver process would be, and they did go over the aspect of what is infeasibility and public interest, and they defined those. I don't know that I need to get, that's really in the weeds. I don't know if I think that's in the notes, so you guys could look over that. If it's something that we want to move or have our city council consider, these are things we might want to make sure that we address or consider when they're looking at their at that particular issue. But anyway, questions. That was it was really interesting to hear all of the comments, and most people were pretty supportive of it. They were conscious to be wanting to listen to the community and make sure that all the people involved would have a say and be aware of what's going on. And the impact on their carbon footprint is going to be pretty small, but they kind of said you got to start somewhere. So, and this seemed like the ban on low-rise residential seemed the most easily implemented. All the things you need to do that are in place. You don't need any new technologies. You don't need anything else. And it stops the spigot of expanding natural gas. That seemed to be the biggest concern, is that they would, stop it. It's here, we have some, but we don't have to do any more.
Yeah. Brian or Ray? Brian?
Thanks for your presentation. Like if there was say an apartment complex that was maybe 2 stories that was existing, and they were gonna do a major remodel, tearing out walls, re-roofing, but it had existing gas to it. Could they continue to use gas, or would they have to get an exemption, or?
Well, you know, for this particular motion, my understanding it was new construction. It wasn't necessarily remodel. Now,
So it's
that
not
might be,
just the permitting thing.
yeah, it might be that in the permit process, they said that anyone, what was it? Anyone asking for a permit, where is it? And of
Line
course,
10.
the city manager is going to be drafting it, but it says permit, any permit for all low-rise residential buildings. So I suppose if it's a permit, if you need a permit, I suppose they could say it's got to be electric.
And
If it's
is
a
it
major
felt
remodel,
that
it requires permit.
in Oregon, can we do that, or is that still a legal question that you can ban?
You know, they looked at, they addressed that code amendment thing, and I think that the way, because it's a permit process, that's a local decision, right? There are codes that have to be, building codes, the state of Oregon building codes have to be followed, but there's nothing in the state of Oregon building codes that says you have to have gas or electric. That's not part of it. So my understanding was that it seemed like that was kind of like a sweet spot where you could kind of wiggle your way in legally without having to worry about going against the Oregon state building codes.
Yeah, that was my question, Andrea. On whether they would still have to go forward with the state code amendment. It wasn't clear to me. I guess we'll find out as they proceed.
Yeah.
And like Brian, I also want to thank you for putting this together. It's really nice that you boiled down hours of discussion down to something that was easy to read.
Yeah, I tried to pull out the basic parts. Yeah, my impression is that it came under that number 5, where it is local. There's a local control aspect of it for that sort of a permit, and that you're not. It's just, we're not doing permits for gas buildings. That's all. You need a permit? Oh, we don't do permits for gas infrastructure. We only do permits for electric buildings. So it's not going against the code, but it's just saying, no, we're not going to do those. So that was my understanding, but you know, I'm sure they're going to get they'll have some public hearings. And I'm not sure what they deal with Northwest Natural Gas, which is not our gas company. We deal with Avista. So, and I know Northwest, and they talked about this in the meeting too. Northwest Natural Gas has really been hard hitting their public campaign on how great they are for the environment and how they're reducing their carbon footprint and etc. But yeah, I think they're doing it, and they looked at all those issues and it looked like it was going to work. So I thought it was pretty cool. Any other
I think-
questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I found this incredibly inspiring, and thank you for sharing, you know, what one of our sister cities is up to. And it, just as you're presenting, Andrea, I just thought, you know, what's holding Ashland back from doing something similar in 2022?
Yeah, I think we could do it, and it's only on new construction, but
Yeah.
or new construction permits. But yeah, anyway,
Well,
if we want to move forward with that.
I guess the thing is, in Eugene, who was handling the discussion? Was it the city council or was it a subgroup of
Nope,
community?
it was the city council.
Yeah, so that's one difference. It's not on our city council's radar right now, but we do have 2 items to start the discussion on the city buildings, and we can see how that builds
So-
towards, you know, making it bigger than that.
Yeah, someone brought it on their city council. Someone brought it as an action item to their council. You know,
Was
one
it-
of the
so-
council members brought it.
Is that how it worked? Was it one of the council members or was it the staff? Because there's a staff person who's the equivalent of Stu. Was it brought by the city manager and the climate, whatever that person's title is, that brought it? Or was it, do they have a commission? Like, do they have a
Oh, those are
commission
good
like
questions.
us?
I don't know. They have a plan like our SEEP. They call it a
Right.
decarbonization plan. So they have a plan. They said this was a part of their action plan, a part of their decarbonization plan. And my impression when I was watching the work group, it was a council work group, was that this had been brought forward by their mayor and one other council as a motion, and then they bantered around the contents of the motion, what they wanted to do. They had presentations by staff and by the staff presenter is the one who reviewed the other cities that have done this and presented those 5 options. So that staff person, that was the city of Eugene staff person, had gone through and looked at like Berkeley. I'm not sure the other cities, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but had looked at what other cities had done with their fossil gas prohibitions, and then looked at the Oregon's parameters in terms of building codes, and put together the 5 options of what you would do. And in a couple of those options, you would need code amendments. You would need to go through the process of getting special permission from the state. But the avenue that they took was the one that didn't require code amendments and that kind of thing.
So Andra, on the theory that no good deed goes unpunished, can we ask you to do a little
Some
bit
more?
more?
Sure, I can try.
So-
I can try.
So I also want to echo the, great thanks to you for putting this together in a very clear way. I think that question in terms of thinking about our situation, understanding where this, a little bit more of the process where this came from. Was this proposed? Was this previously requested as an issue by City Council, directed to staff to come up with a study of the issue? Was this a commission similar to the Climate Policy Commission here in Ashland that made a recommendation that this should be presented to the council for consideration? Or was it a staff initiative, staff and city manager initiative to bring it to the city council for, so a little bit of the kind of the background on it, I guess, if you could find.
You want to know about it's a process.
Process
You want to
question.
know about the process. What process? What was their process for getting that from the theoretical into somebody having an emotion and discussing it and looking at all the information? Okay, I think I can look back at some of their Rick put something in here, and Rick was the one who gave me the link to start
Oh, here we
with.
go. Yep, there we go.
Press
So good.
release, council advances policy to transition new construction to
For
all
the-
electric.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it was from the council, but I can look more into that. I'll look at those again and see if I can kind of discern where it came from in
Okay.
terms of process.
great. Thank you. Okay, I want to move on to another item on the agenda, which is so in the context of our discussion of the work plan for 2022, 2023, there was an item that we thought needed to be, or we understood that Gary had been who had been the person responsible for it, had been recommending dropping it because of the transportation rule that was approved at the state level. And it's called the Urban Land Use and Transportation Plan, if I've got it correct. And I reached back to Gary after the last meeting and asked if he would give us some of the background on that. So he's prepared a very nice short note that is in the packet, laying out his thinking on that. So I've invited Gary to come and talk with us as a topic expert and walk us through that item. Gary, you able to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So I guess I trust that you've read the memo, so there's no reason to review that. But
Yeah.
I guess in order to expedite kind of the discussion, I was curious as to what the CPC members' rationale might have been for dropping it. Clearly
So
transportation.
let me just cut you off there.
Okay.
There was no ration. The CPC didn't decide to drop it. The CPC, it was me and Rick as the previous chair understood direction from you that it was no longer necessary. So there was no
Oh.
initiative by anything other than apparently a misunderstanding of your
Oh,
intention.
Okay,
So that's
All
why I reached back to you to ask
Yeah.
if you could clarify for us
Okay.
what is your intention, and then you provided this note. So there's no
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
there's no intention to drop anything.
that's a relief, because clearly there's a tremendous amount of work to realize the goals embodied not only in the SEAP, but also in the updated climate-friendly transportation planning rule. It will be enormously controversial, and I think that it is crucial that the CPC add its voice to that discussion, because without that, we may not have the climate perspective embodied within the discussion as we might. And I think there's also merits of having a city government institution advocating for outcomes that, in fact, aren't normally on the city's radar. So making bicycling and walking practical, safe, and efficient, changing land uses so that walking is a desirable way to accomplish one's daily activities and thereby avoid trips in the automobile. I mean, there are just so many reasons for the CPC to be involved that I think the key issue is, how do we organize ourselves or yourselves in a way that can most effectively advance the interests of greenhouse gas reductions as a part of these land use changes that the city's planning commission will undertake and evaluate, as well as the Public Works Department in their update of the transportation system plan. Those are both huge undertakings. The one we know from what Ray said will likely start in January. The Land Conservation and Development Commission requires a certain time frame in the designation of climate-friendly areas. Those are the areas where, under if subject to development at least, they would be easily walkable areas where you can accomplish everyday tasks within reasonable walking distance. So those will be pivotal in my estimation in terms of achieving the SEEP's goal and hopefully making good progress on emissions reductions from the transportation sector earlier rather than later.
Okay, so I'd like to move forward on this. Everybody's had an opportunity to review Gary's extensive notes on why he would like to include in the CPC's 2022-2023 work program an item that would be titled Urban Land Use and Transportation Plan, I guess, although you haven't called it quite that. I don't remember what the terminology was before. I'd like to share my screen and indicate what specifically we're talking about, and then just get some reactions from folks. I'm going to share my screen here. So here, I think the easiest place to see it is here, and this is of the item under 5.5, the CPC update 2022. There's an appendix that summarizes all of the different items of our work plan, formal planning, and we've talked about this in the last couple of meetings. The several elements under formal planning, under clean buildings, the path off natural gas, and then energy efficient transportation is the third, is the fourth initiative, I guess. We have incorporate SEEP goals into the transportation system plan. I think the implication of Gary's recommendation is that we add an item just before incorporate SEEP goals into the transportation system plan, which say undertake an urban land use and transportation plan, or what specifically is it that we what's the product that would be a result of this work program item? Gary, can you give me the language on that?
Well, let me back up a little bit. Sorry, Bob. I think that a little bit of background is important here. The SEEP, while it's a notable document with great vision for how to go about things, is largely silent on how to do it. So the SEEP goals talk about making Ashland bicycle friendly. Well, that doesn't help in terms of actually making it practical for people to bicycle. I think most people in the general public would assume that Ashland is already bike friendly, right? I mean, especially if you consider the surrounding communities within the Rogue Valley. The SEEP doesn't work for the kind of detail that we need to advance, or the kind of detail that I believe the CPC needs to advance in order to provide substantive and specific recommendations for the TSP update. The SEEP also talks about reducing vehicle miles of travel, which is kind of the cumulative distance that we all travel daily or annually to accomplish our everyday tasks. Well, reducing VMT per capita is a nice concept. In fact, the new Land Conservation and Development Commission rule requires that. But the key is, how do you do that? What specific strategies do we need, or does the commission need to advance in order to actually achieve that outcome? And it's those details that the transportation system plan will deal with. I'm quite confident that with the SEEP as it is currently written, that most any transportation system plan that's developed by the city will conform to the SEEP. That's not going to be good enough to achieve the outcomes and the goals that the SEEP provides. And the document that I prepared, more than a year ago, the Urban Land Use and Transportation document, which was largely intended to be a substitute text for the existing SEEP section of the same title, provides many of those details, not all, but many. And it is that kind of detailed approach that I think the commission needs to advance in order to effectively influence the outcome of the transportation system plan. Again, to rely upon the SEEP is inadequate, in large part because the SEEP is too vague to carry out its grand vision.
So Gary, you've tiptoed around my question by providing a lot of background. But what I think specifically what I'm looking for in order to be able to put it into our work plan is each one of these things a work plan. You called it I think this time you called it the Urban Land Use and Transportation Document, which is supposed to be part of an updated SEEP.
Right.
But I guess for this, what I'm looking for, since we're not doing an updated SEEP as part of this work plan, what do you want to call it? Is it a Urban Land Use and Transportation Plan or strategy, or we could call it the document if you prefer, that is as an input into the transportation system plan, or what specifically are you asking for?
I think the most helpful thing, I think, is a draft urban land use and transportation implementation plan of the SEEP, so that we acknowledge the SEEP, but we're basically putting together an implementation plan
Implementation.
that document, and thereby having more detail.
Gary, I'm trying to understand what input will happen naturally when we update the TSP. If you've got to follow the new transportation rules, are they sort of optional or up to the city's interpretation how they're implemented, or is it?
Well,
So doesn't the new transportation rules get updated that you've got to follow when you develop the new TSP?
well, the state's rules are minimums. So the minimum is that your transportation system plan has to show a reduced vehicle miles of travel per capita from today or whenever the plan's adopted to the forecast year. So if you had a 0.1% reduction in vehicle miles of travel per capita, then that would technically satisfy the requirement. Making the transportation system or following a document called the NACTA, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, Designing for All Ages and All Abilities document, if you were to follow that and have a complete list of projects that would yield, if they were implemented, a very high quality bicycle network that in fact would be practical for people of all ages and all abilities to use. But having those projects simply listed in the plan is not getting them on the ground. That the plan needs to prioritize those projects in a way that we have a functional network in the near term. And that's about priority setting. But the plan can still comply simply by providing that total list. But as with the
Okay, so should
protected-
we then, we just want to be involved, the CPC or whatever the new committee is
Right.
called, needs to be involved when the TSP is developed so that we can provide recommendations.
and what we need to
And what gets
do-
implemented is going to come down to public input plus dollars and time,
and
right?
but importantly, Ray, we need to know what it is that we recommend or that CPC recommends. And if you're reacting to a document, it's much different than formulating a strategy to affect that document. And what I think needs to be done is to have that forethought to develop those positions so that the commission, the CPC that is, can provide effective input throughout the process. Rather than, again, just responding, do you like A or B?
Okay, then you're saying someone on the commission needs to develop a document that is going to be used as recommendations for the next TSP.
And that's what the document that I alluded to would do. It would be an implementation strategy for the SEEP.
Caitlin, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, well, I appreciate that context, Gary, and it's shocking to me that anything that you described there would be controversial, but it just sounds like wonderful improvements to the city. But I do wonder, you know, are there staff members within the transportation department whose job it should be to, you know, in updating this transportation plan, you know, designing it around the new climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking, you know, that these new rules, and you know, it seems like we need, or that this commission needs to be having a conversation and understanding what city staff will be doing in relation to these new rules in advance of coming at them with our recommendations. From the perspective of, yes, I think we need to be involved from the get-go and not reacting to a document or a plan that's, you know, almost all the way there. But I just wonder, is there, I guess this is a question, is, you know, is there capacity within the city to be reviewing this climate friendly, equitable communities new rule and, you know, providing something to us of saying, okay, we've interpreted this new rule, here's how the city is proposing in the draft that we're going to be, you know, attacking this.
Caitlin, the city ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, will be rewarding a grant or at least dedicating funding to the city's update of a transportation system plan. That is likely, if, you know, and I'm guessing here, somewhere around $200,000 to $300,000 in order to hire a team of consultants to help in developing a plan that is in response to the new transportation rule. Again, that process will be open to the public and provide a wide array of input, including those people who will find objection to the rules as were adopted by the state. Again, largely because they will diminish the convenience and speed with which auto drivers can negotiate through town. And that will lead to controversy. So again, my perspective is that the CPC can provide a voice in support of the most effective and efficacious strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector by considering the development or by developing a SEEP implementation strategy document that lays out what it is needs to be done, optimizes it in a way. You know, again, we're looking at trying to squeeze out every greenhouse gas emission from the entire community. And we need to exploit every opportunity there is, whether it be in transportation or housing or sewage treatment. It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
But to get back to your point, the city will be hiring a consultant to fill in where they don't have the capacity. Certainly the city will supervise that process and be engaged in it, but it will largely be a consultant-driven process.
Well, it's always concerning when you hear the future of your community as a consultant-driven process, but
And the last time, in my estimation, the city's TSP, which was again developed largely by this firm called Kettleson and Associates, was grossly under.
I want to move us along. I kind of want to move us along.
Yep, we're done.
I think I'd like. Seems I see something, a suggestion. To recommend, so Rick has a suggestion. Recommend CPC focus on development of consultant RFP for near-term work already part of the formal planning work. Description of page 2 of Climate Policy Commission Update 2022.
Great idea, Rick, but actually the scope of work will be developed by the Oregon Department of Transportation. That's work that's currently being done and will likely be uniform across all 8 metropolitan areas with the possible exception of Portland, which has slightly different parameters than the other 7.
Okay.
So that's fixed.
Okay, so this all came up in the context, of course, of our work program for the next year, and there's a lot of that's up in the air on that. I think Gary has given us a lot of background on this, calling it an urban land use and transportation implementation plan. It sounds to me, as you've described it, it's less of an implementation plan for the SEEP than something that's more of a priority setting from the CPC to provide as input to the transportations to the TSP. So I think really something that we can get our hands around is helping to set priorities within the TSP process, having to do with the SEEP on these issues, urban land use and transportation. So what I would like to suggest is that we add to the work plan an item that says urban land use and transportation priority setting as an input to for the TSP. Does that capture what you have in mind, Gary?
I think, well, let me.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on it.
I know. Let me have 1 minute here.
Okay.
I think what the Transportation Commission has ostensibly acknowledged is that they will incorporate the SEEP into the transportation system plan. And that if the SEEP were more specific would be perfect, but the SEEP is too vague to provide the kind of direction that's needed in order to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions to the extent that's needed. So I think your suggestion is fine. It's just that I believe that the CPC needs to consider where it thinks the transportation system needs to go as an a priori action to actually the development of the transportation system plan itself. It's laying the groundwork for your participation in that process that I think is essential.
I captured that, and that's what I was trying to capture by calling it priorities. It's actually our priorities, the CPC's priorities, in making sure that the SEEP is reflected in the preparation of the transportation system plan. And the timing on this needs to be done in the fairly short term in order to really be useful for that. Can I get some reactions from other members of the, we have the other issue, of course, like many of the things on the SEEP, the CPC update is, are we going to have the capacity to do that with the commissioners that we will have when this is, at some time in the future? So that's going to be a general comment for everything. So we are going to need people that are going to have the capacity to do this. I'm hoping that we will. I think it's our task at this point to really lay out what we think are the best possible priorities for our work program for this next year. And I'd like to propose that as the way to reflect this item. Can I get some thoughts on this from members of the 5 members of the commission? Actually, I don't really need to limit it to 5 members.
I think that's an improvement over what we had previously.
Yeah. Okay. Others? Yeah. Okay. Can I just take it as a guidance from this group, including Gary and Rick as experts, subject matter experts, that I should reflect in the CPC work plan, both in the appendix and also in the body, this item as I described it, urban land use and transportation priority setting for directing the CPC's activity, recommendations or input to the transportation system plan development. Is that okay? Thanks, everybody. I'd like to, thanks, Gary. That was helpful.
Bye-bye.
Very helpful. Okay. Okay, I would like to, the next item on the agenda is the CPC work plan. I think this is the major outstanding item on the CPC work plan. What I would like to do is actually take up right now whether we want to draft any comments on the resolution on the consolidated CPC and CCOC. Is that an agreement? Is everybody in agreement with that as a topic right now to take up? Okay, I think so. Let me share my screen. There it is. So I don't know if you can see this. What do you see? Let me see if I can get it to bigger. Okay, this I believe is the resolution. Can you see the resolution?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, we don't need to talk about it a lot. What I would propose in discussing this is that we focus our attention not on the overall framework for committees or commissions, but only on the specifics of the Climate and Energy Policy Advisory Committee, CPAC. Is that, at least we start there. If we want to make some comments about the overall setup of committees, then that would be fine. But I think it's really where we have, I think priority input would be on this. Is that in broad agreement for everybody? I'm not seeing or hearing any agreement or disagreement. Brian, you want to talk about it? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, one thing I see the need to, go about the specifics of the joint climate, the new climate thing, but also just the general thing of these new committees is that I think we need to really push that they need to set up a time frame for this. I mean, my own personal situation is I still work part-time and I like to try to enjoy retirement by traveling. And right now I plan everything around these meetings. And I plan things, half a year or more sometimes in advance. And, people need to know if they're going to be on these and when they're going to meet and stuff. And it just seems like it's been, we've been talking about it now for 3 or 4 meetings. And it doesn't seem like it's really any closer to like a date.
Well, Brian, it is on the agenda for the 16th.
Okay.
And it was on the agenda for the 2nd, and
Right,
they didn't get to
it was a new item and they didn't get to it. So hopefully it's at the top of the agenda for next week.
I hear your frustration, Brian, and I'm sorry, and I feel it as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is we've had really, really committed young people who want to get going on this, and they're being thwarted because there's no process to get people on commissions now. Okay, I'm just frustrated.
Well, the good news is the ex officio numbers 6, that should help. Also, 2 of the members are supposed to be younger than 35. But I think, Bob, given the previous discussion with Tanya, I had a problem with the 3rd sentence in terms of what our role is, or not role, but what our mission is. And it sounds like Tanya provided some input to that. So I don't know if we need to do that as a commission as well, or is her input sufficient as
I
a
guess
liaison to the council?
Yeah, I think she won't be able to. I think she told us what comments she had given as input to this, and I think it's also reasonable to expect that she'll make that those points herself in the commission. I think what she was suggesting to us is that it would be helpful to the council for us to provide some inputs ourselves, whether we are in line with her comments or a disagreement with her comments, but that the council would value hearing from the commissions who have actually been working on this for some time. So if it's something that we as a commission feel that the scope of this work of the CPAC should be tailored fairly narrowly to, or at least to prioritize the oversight and implementation of the Climate and Energy Action Plan, then I think we should say that. And if we think that it should be broad as currently drafted, then we should say that. So I think one item that we should just discuss here is, do we think it should be relatively narrowly defined? And as Tanya suggested, prioritize the implementation and oversight of the CEAP, or with some ability to comment on broader environmental issues, or we want to keep it broad like this. Can I have some thoughts about that? Is there reactions to what Tanya was suggesting and how we see this particular issue. Brian?
Well, I guess it depends, like if we kind of narrowly define it as climate, it seems like we have to be able to talk about things like water. I mean, clearly the intent is to get rid of the two commissions and have one, and there are definitely things that the CCOC does that aren't kind of climate related. And I don't know where those things would fit. I don't know if, you know, what you and Marnie thought about that in your discussions.
So when I talked with Marnie's, I hate to characterize what somebody else said without her being here, but what I understood from what she said is that really the Climate and Energy Action Plan contains the broad, almost any topic that we would be wanting to do. There are certain things that are underdeveloped in it. We talked specifically, Brian, about the vulnerability assessment, and Marnie shared with me that she was very heavily involved in preparing that vulnerability assessment that we talked about updating as part of the work plan for this next time, which is good background for me to know. I didn't know that. But she felt that just about every topic that we could think about, including the topic that Joe raised in our conversation with him, which had to do with impermeable surfaces, she believed that was included within the Climate Energy Action Plan as an important issue.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. I
can't see you, but I can. I have to.
So
Sorry.
I kind of agree with what you said, Bob, that I'm okay with this new revision of the plan, because I do think there is some overlap. If we do everything to deal with the SEEP in terms of not only are we looking at reducing our carbon footprint, but we're looking at mitigating the effects of climate change that are going to happen in our community. It seems like that overlap is there, but if we can say that a priority of this committee is implementing the SEEP and even I don't know, implementing the SEEP in a more robust manner, and that would be a part of the CPAC. I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with a statement that we would like to see the SEEP as a priority, and then of course it says here not the only thing that committee, that advisory committee would look at, but that it would be a priority, that we'd look at that first and then move on to other issues, because I believe the SEEP doesn't have a some information in there about mitigation of the effects of climate change that are coming. Isn't that part of it? And that's going to be part of what the environmental impact is.
Yeah, it's mostly mitigation. It's not as strong an adaptation.
Yeah. So this committee seems like it would all then have that adaptation part as well. And the SEEP is the mitigation, and then this committee is the adaptation.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. I think the SEEP does include adaptation as a goal. It does.
Right, it just didn't have as much detail.
But it doesn't have as much detail. So that I think that one thing that we could do, and I'm seeing Rick's comment in the chat where he says, he's saying, I'll read it first. I'm hard pressed to think of any significant environmental item that is not addressed in some way in the SEEP. And that was Marty's point as well. Recycling, for example. So broadly implementing SEEP and responding to specific council requests seems a reasonable choice to me. And that's what Tanya had said. A revision of the SEEP as needed should be part of the change. So that's a separate topic. Let me mention that. Let me talk about the first point first. I guess I would like to suggest that in that third sentence that Ray mentioned, that's relatively broad, that we could say the committee's priority focus should be on implementing the SEEP both in terms of mitigation and adaptation
Adaptation.
goals. With the and in addition, responding to specific council requests that may touch environmental issues that are outside the SEEP. Does that make sense to people?
Yep.
I don't see everybody.
Yeah, I like
Let's
that.
see.
You can't see me, but I like it. I think I think that will suit the purpose.
Okay, Brian, do you?
I liked what you said, Bob, but I might, where you say implementing, I might add something like implementing and updating or something. I think it's
Yeah.
important that the work we do or the work this new committee does is seen as kind of a living processor, and the SEEP's a living document that, you know,
And that's kind.
updated to, you know, reflect the changing environment, but also the realities of what's possible.
Okay. So that is also consistent with what Rick was saying in his other part of the chat, which is revision of the SEEP as needed should be part of the chart of the charge. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. Implement and update SEEP as needed, including both its mitigation and adaptation objectives,
How about,
goals, I guess.
Bob, and when you mentioned SEEP, what if we say the broad outline of the SEEP? It's to show people that the SEEP is very broad. It's not
Well,
just about greenhouse gases. Like you say, you could talk about water, you could talk about drought, you could talk about fire. I mean, you could talk about air conditioning, building codes, solar, renewables. You know, most of what he has on here, or many of the things he has on here, is already included in the SEEP.
Smoke.
Yeah, air quality, indoor health, social equity, implementation, adaptations, you know.
So I'd rather not use words like broad. I'd like to
Okay.
rather say these.
Is there some
I'm trying
other,
to- Yeah, I think these the strategies, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strategies identified in the specific documents. I think my sense is that we're better off referring to a specific document that has already been approved by the city council. It's not
multiple
something-
strategies, maybe say?
Well, there are 6. There are 6.
Well, you know, right now, I don't think he,
Buildings and energy, urban form, land use and transportation, consumption and materials management, natural systems, public health, safety and well-being, and cross-cutting strategies.
yeah, pretty broad.
Yeah. Let's see. Rick is saying the powers and duties section, I believe, was the result of much work by people that came before us. Yeah, right. I think it is consistent with broadly implementing the SEEP. So why do these powers exactly? Well, that's maybe the point. Let me just see if I can pull that up real quick. Let me see if I can re-share. Okay. Let's try this. See if you can see this. So this is what Rick is talking about. Powers and duties. So we could just recommend retaining these powers and duties, develop recommendations for the City of Ashland's Climate and Energy Action Plan and any updates to the SEEP, recommend modifications to include benchmarks, targets, or actions contained in the climate plan as needed to incorporate the best available science and practices to achieve the City of Ashland's climate-related goals and targets, manage a process for considering amendments and updates to the SEEP, monitor and make recommendations on implementation of the SEEP for community and for city operations, periodically review progress toward achievement of the SEEP's greenhouse gas and fossil fuel reduction targets, recommend changes in city ordinances, administrative rules, and processes that facilitate or incentivize residents and businesses to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, work to ensure that the SEEP incorporates long-term social, economic, and environmental goals, and work to ensure that the SEEP is socially equitable for all community members, including low-income young people, persons of color, the elderly, and those living with disabilities. Are there things, so this is the powers and duties of the Climate Policy Commission, we could go to the powers and duties of the Conservation Commission and see if there are things that we would recommend adding to that, which I'll do right now. So powers and duties generally consistent with city policies and procedures, educate and advocate for actions community climate recovery goals. So that's consistent with the Climate and Energy Action Plan, make recommendations on strategies, actions, and programs related to the wise and efficient use of resources by all Ashland citizens. So including 6 items. So what about modifying the text, suggesting modification of the text to just simply repeat these 2, the powers and duties of both the Climate Policy Commission and the CCOC. In fact, I think it's somewhat narrower than the broad brush that is suggested under the resolution. Does that make sense to people? I'll stop sharing.
Yes,
Yes.
that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I agree with Rick. Why throw out the powers and duties we already have?
Right. Why reinvent? Right.
Was that in what you just read about the CCOC, did you mention education?
Let's see.
Because
It
that's
says,
become a major charge that frankly, I don't know that they're doing much of, but was a big charge for their commission to kind of educate the community on the issues.
it does say, consistent with city policies and procedures, educate and advocate for Ashland's community climate recovery goals. So Rick is saying the CCOC powers and duties were mostly to narrow their focus. The broader CPC statements cover these things in his view. So in Rick's view, the just stating the CPCs and maybe adding the words educate and advocate.
I do think education needs to be in there.
Education needs to be in there. Could cover it.
And so then what about if we agree on that? Joe wants us, then we got the thing, occasional advise the council
Plus
with
occasional.
specific.
Right.
Okay.
Caitlin, does that make sense to you? Brian, you're
It does.
you're occupied. Andra?
Yes, I
Yes,
agree.
okay. Brian, what we're suggesting is adding education to really restating the CPC powers and duties, but then making sure that we add the education point. That's, I think, the item A in the CCOC's powers and duties consistent with city policies and procedures, educate and advocate for Ashland's community climate recovery goals.
Yeah, I think that has to be in there.
Okay. Okay. So what I take from this conversation is that I could draft something on behalf of the commission, recommending a restatement of the purpose in the resolution specific to the Climate Environment Policy Advisory Committee that simply states that reiterates these powers and duties from the CPC and that first line from the CCOC, and then responds to specific council environmental advisory requests.
And then Bob, is this coming from us?
Yeah.
Or
The idea was
wanting
the
to
idea-
do this as a joint thing with the CCOC?
they don't have a quorum.
Okay,
CCOC can't take any decisions as a body because they don't have a quorum. And we actually, and I'm sorry that I missed this as an opportunity for in crafting the agenda, that we actually do have an opportunity to say something as a body. So it would have to be from us alone. Okay, let me see. Is there on the resolution here? That's the first part. Do we have? Let me share that again now. So I think I've got the direction on that, on the responsibilities. Let's see if I can share this. Do we have any comments about the 9 voting members and up to 6 optional ex officio? Do we want to say that we like that, we don't like that, or not say anything?
I think if there's something you don't want to change, you don't say anything.
Good.
It's fine. No, we
Okay.
don't need to say anything.
Okay. Then the two individuals designated as alternate members. Do you want to say anything about alternate members?
I provided my input to him. I don't know if he'll make any changes. The last draft didn't make any changes to the alternate members. I thought it was a little confusing what the role is as far as attendance and responsibilities, but because I thought he put that in to make sure we have a quorum, but then we're changing the rules of the quorum. I believe,
Right. We have to look and see, but right, I think
So-
we are.
whatever.
Okay. Then there's this voting, and alternate members will be comprised of individuals residing in the city. Okay. So here's now the CPAC shall be responsible for assisting the city in the following. Here is where I would say we substitute the powers and duties. This is the powers and duties statement. And then up above is where we have the general statement that talks about the SEEP and additional, the first statement that I said, overseeing and implementing and updating the climate and energy action plan and both its mitigation and adaptation goals, as well as responding to specific council environmental advisory requests. That we put up front in the third sentence of that first paragraph. And then we recommend replacing this paragraph, this section here, if you can see my cursor, with the verbatim text that's in the powers and duties of the CPC, adding the first item under CCOC that has to do with education and advocacy. Is that clear to everybody? And is everybody in agreement with that?
It's not clear to me if we've completely covered number 2 here. And I don't really see an issue with it there, the way it is, but you'd have to look at it closer to see if that's already incorporated. I'm also wondering, does the SEEP cover that first line in 1, which is what the Conservation Committee really was focusing on? I don't know, Brian, you were on the committee.
Ray, I'm not exactly sure I'm following what you're trying to.
Well,
Okay.
first, I think Bob recommended replacing both 1 and 2 with what we discussed on our current duties. And I said number 2, I'm not sure is covered with what we have currently on our webpage. It might be some additional, if it is, then fine. But on number 1, I also wasn't sure if materials management, waste prevention, reduction, and recycling would be covered. And the question is, do we want that to be part of the new committee's charter as well?
So
Since it's-
looking at this, these first 4 bullets are almost verbatim, not precisely, but very close to the powers and duties that are articulated for the CCOC.
Okay.
So
Oh,
in
yeah,
fact,
right,
what-
for the CCOC.
So in fact, what they've done, what it looks like he's done is pull from the CCOC, which is the slightly broader, make it rather than the CPC. And we were talking about reverting the order and saying really the CP
Yeah.
focus on the SEEP and implementation of the SEEP is priority, and then anything else is at the request.
I would really recommend just keeping it simple, like those bullet points under 1, those 5 things. Almost get rid of those and just make recommendations on strategies, actions, and programs related to the wise and efficient use of community resources and environmental related issues, recognizing the urgency of addressing climate issues. Hence, the primary focus will be on implementing and updating the SEEP. Just keep it, I mean, that would cover just about every environmental issue. And then you don't have people saying, well, your charge was to do electricity, water, natural resource, not smoke issue. I don't know. It just keep it simple and broad, I think.
Other thoughts? So I think Brian is suggesting an alternative to what we were talking about first, which is adopting what's currently in the powers and duties of the CPC and making it broader, but by using the little I, making recommendations on strategies, actions, et cetera, but then adding, not including, but environmental related issues or programs. What did you say, Brian? Sorry.
It's related to the wise and efficient use of
Related.
community resources and environmentally related issues, recognizing that the primary focus will be on climate issues
Recognizing, right.
or something like that.
I think you gotta have the word SEEP in there.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't
no,
know.
and the CPAC will devote the vast majority of its time and resources to implementing and updating the SEEP.
So Bob, where would you put the current duties of the SEEP? Because we had a chance to put it up front too, right?
At the
Well, there's no
Yeah.
upfront. There's this. It's just that, you know,
Yeah,
there's a general statement here. So what I was thinking that we were doing is making a specific statement using the statement that Brian was talking about down here. But, you know, putting it up here.
okay. Well, okay,
So I think we've got two different pathways here. One pathway is to try to draw as much as possible on the current powers and duties of the CPC and the CCOC and repeat them here. And the second alternative that Brian is suggesting is not do all of that and be much broader, but make sure that we're hitting the high notes of climate, the SEEP, the Climate and Energy Action Plan, and updating the Climate and Energy Action Plan, both in its mitigation and adaptation goals.
well,
I
I
think-
guess I would propose taking that sentence below and putting it up here and making it broad and mentioning SEEP. And then down here, where it gets into more detail, what your responsibilities are, put our duties.
That makes sense, Brian? Are you tracking that?
Yeah, that would be fine. And then again, I argue for being kind of broad because I think then when whatever members from the two committees plus whatever other community members come to make this new group, there's going to be a number of meetings, sit down and like, what do we really want to focus on?
Yeah, I would
think that's
agree,
right.
Brian, that we don't include all the bullets. Just move that sentence up above and change it to mention the SEEP. And then if you want, and replace I with our current duties and responsibilities that we have.
Of the CPC,
Right.
class education.
Right.
Does that make this, can I get a thumbs up on that or a thumbs down? Okay, I'm seeing Brian. I'm seeing, I'm not seeing Andra. I see Andra with a quizzical look on her face. And
Yes.
muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm okay with that. I was looking at these bullets and they seem pretty all encompassing. They seem to include all of the things that were in our powers and duties thing. It's not quite as maybe specified in this particular document, but it seems to cover just about everything. And the SEEP is in there. It's in the last bullet. I mean, we could move that to the top, but I'm okay with doing what you guys said. I'm just kind of going, I don't know. So
let me do the following. Let me just let everybody, I'm not going to read it again because it's too tedious for me to just take up the airtime like that, but I want to make sure everybody can see it. So I'm going to stop sharing this and start sharing this. And I promise that we're going to be ending soon on time. So this is the way this is the CCOC's powers and duties. You can recognize those bullets, consumption of materials management, okay? And Rick's previous point was that was drafted intentionally to, what did you say? To make it, to narrow the CCOC's focus, but it's different, it's on that. Let me just now go to the CPC's powers and duties, which is here. This is very focused
right.
on the SEEP. This is very focused on the SEEP. And then what we discussed is putting this much detail in here about the SEEP, because there is an ordinance for the SEEP, and the CPC was set up as helping with oversight and implementation of the SEEP. And then add to this the education and advocacy. It could be a bullet, it could be bullet A instead of A, or it could be an I. I guess I was just putting it as an I. Educating and advocating, whatever that bullet was, the specific language that comes from the CCOC. And then leaving out the detail about electricity, water, natural resource usage, renewable energy, renewable resource options, air, water, and quality action planning, because all of that stuff is essentially in this six strategy of the SEEP.
Okay, so you guys are saying that all of those other things that the CEOC has, that's included in the SEEP, that the SEEP takes care of those issues. We don't need to say them again because they're already there. As long as we're saying we're implementing the SEEP with these specifications, we're covering all that other stuff. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I understand, but I would really like to rely on Brian and Rick, I think, who have been involved in that and knows more of the thinking than I do.
Well, I like what you just had there with the CPC kind of guidelines, because I think that's a good work frame for the new group. And if you could, I don't know, put that up again, maybe.
Yep.
And then to your point, I think the CCOC thing should not have all those bullet points, just be very broad. But then under the powers and duties of this new group, like you say, all these, they've worked to ensure, I think you could say work to ensure that the work to ensure that the I don't know, something that the work how the process of the SEEP is communicated to the community, and that a plan is in place to educate the community about ways that corporally and individually community members can work to make the SEEP successful. I mean, somehow that, that there's an education piece that's part of the goal.
Can I let me share this. So again, this is what the conservation and climate outreach was. So all of those bullets that we talked about before, what I'm talking about is adding as a point I to the list that's in the CPC, the point A that says consistent with city policies, educate and advocate for Ashland's community climate recovery goals, which is exactly that's the name of the ordinance, then point 9.4 climate recovery goals. So that's about educating and advocating for that.
Yeah,
let's do that. Make sense?
Yeah, I think kind of basing that as an I, and I just wonder, the climate recovery goals to me speaks, I may be wrong on this, but speaks more to mitigation. And I think part of the, you don't think so, Bob? Okay.
Well, let me pull it up.
Be sure that the educational piece does cover resilience and adaptation too.
So let me just pull it up because it's I'm going to zip you through here. 9.4. So this is what that means. This is the municipal code, climate recovery, chapter 9.4. And this is what it says. And we talk about the climate recovery goals. So now we've referred to as the ordinance, the climate recovery goals, which is 9.40.020 climate recovery goals. The city shall actively encourage community entities and individuals to incorporate achievement of the community climate recovery goals as set forth in the most current city council approved version of the climate and energy action plan.
Yeah, it included that.
It includes it.
Okay, great. Okay,
so I think this is trying. I mean, I think Rick is right that the powers and duties were drafted very artfully in order to cover all this stuff. And I'm seeing, let's see. Oh my God. Rick is saying, I sure hope CPC momentum is maintained into whatever the new group is. I'd hate to see it be a totally new body of people have to think all over again what we're trying to do. Well, I'm hoping that this group will continue to stick with the program. That's what I'm hoping.
But I think cutting and pasting that part on the education as point, as, you know,
Mhm.
would be good. I can.
Yeah, that
Board
seems to
of-
cover all the bases.
Okay, that's what because I want, you know, absolutely clear direction from this group because I'm going to be drafting it on behalf of this group. So I don't want to be freelancing in any way. So if that's a guidance that I've got, that I've understood that guidance. Okay,
Well, we don't have much time, right? Because they're gonna,
no, we don't.
we'll see if Joe gets it and makes any changes, or at least if we copy Tanya on it and it's up for discussion.
Right. What,
She can bring it up.
yeah, I think what I have to do is actually send it, I'll send it to Joe and Tanya, and then I'll also submit it to the city council as input for the council meeting. Is that right, Mary? Mary will help.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, let's see, have we gotten? Where am I? I've lost it all. Anyway, is there anything else we need to look at on that resolution? I think we covered it all. I think we decided that we're going to focus on the specific mandate of the commission. We're not going to worry about commenting on the members or the terms or any of that sort of stuff. I think it's right. I think we should be focused. Okay, is there anything else that we need to discuss? It's 6:25. It's time for wrap up. And I'm sorry that we went a little bit longer than I had intended, but I think this was a useful, very useful conversation. I very much appreciate having the memory, institutional memory of particularly Brian and Rick on this. Anything else for the? Are we happy with how this meeting went? Can I get a quick evaluation? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways?
It could be our
Okay,
last
good.
meeting, so it went well.
It could be. So we'll be in touch.
Ray, you think things can happen that fast?
Well, if the ordinance gets passed, it depends how much debate there is, you know? We have another month, so we'll see. That's what I mean.
And then the mayor has to appoint everybody.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I think, I'm not making any projection when the next meeting is.
Well, that's a good question. Is if it passes, is the commission immediately dissolved, or will there be like a kind of a holding, you know, a period where there's neither one, you know, the old one's done and the new ones haven't started yet?
That's a good question. I don't know. And that's why I think it's very useful that we've gotten as far as we did on our work plan for 2022. I think that's really good for the next group that takes over, whatever that is. We'll start from there. And Rick says he'd be surprised if this is the last CBC meeting. So anyway,
Okay,
there we go.
Yeah.
Rick will be surprised. Rick may be surprised. You may not be surprised.
I hope it
Thanks,
is.
everybody.
So,
We'll see you next
all right.
time then,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks for sticking with this. I know this has been a bit of a trying, last couple of months, and I think we're all doing the best we can.
Yeah, the whole world's
And,
in transition these days, so,
The whole
and
world's in
thanks for your
transition.
help, Bob.
yeah,
Okay. right.
thanks, bye.
Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Bye.
Okay, Mary.
It's not on the look ahead to do the appointments.
No, I didn't
So
think
it
so.
has to go on the look ahead to do the appointments, because I think once they draft that resolution, it's done. Once it's signed by the people that have to sign it, it's done. So I'm gonna ask about that tomorrow, because
Okay.
there'll be no, like, they even have the Social and Equity Justice Advisory Committee report on the look ahead for in October sometime. So they have to be thinking about it. I thought, okay, so I'm gonna check on that.
Right. I think the
Let
look
you
ahead
know.
is not necessarily reflecting
to
everything.
date,
There's a
no.
lot of moving parts.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks
Okay.
again for everything you're doing.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.